While you watch, please pay attention to these questions. 1. What is hegemonic internationalism, revolutionary internationalism, and liberal internationalism? 2. What is isolationism? 3. How are bilateralism, multilateralism, and supranationalism different? How are they similar? And 4. What types of work are international organizations involved in? So, what is internationalism? Internationalism is how states relate and interact with other states on a global scale. It can be positive or negative depending on the situation, the organization, and the state. There are three main types of internationalism: hegemonic, revolutionary, and liberal. The different types of internationalism represent different views of why the world operates the way it does. So let's start with hegemonic internationalism. But before we can understand hegemonic internationalism, we need to understand what hegemony is. Hegemony is the domination of one group over another. It can be social, political, or economic. In a hegemonic situation, the dominant group is using systemic power to reinforce their position or exert influence over the other group. So now that we understand what hegemony is, let's look closer at hegemonic internationalism. Hegemonic internationalism is the belief that the world is being integrated based on unequal terms, with the dominance of one nation or nation-state over others. It can be seen when one state has more power than another and uses that power to increase their influence. In this image, we can see the power imbalance with the single state on the right being heavier, or having more power, than the three states on the left combined. The key concept with hegemonic internationalism is it's all about power, about how states are always looking to increase their spheres of influence over those states they view as less powerful. So what does this look like historically? The best example of hegemonic internationalism in history is colonialism. Western European powers took turns dividing up the globe and claiming places around the world as their own, regardless of what the original inhabitants thought or wanted. During the colonial period, European states vied for the wealth of other nations. The British Empire, as shown here, and the other empires of countries like France and Spain spanned across the globe and had economic, social, military, and political power over people of other nations. Within hegemonic internationalism, we have cultural hegemony. Cultural hegemony refers to the ability of a group of people to strongly influence the everyday thoughts, expectations, and behavior of the rest of society by directing the normative ideas, values, and beliefs that become the dominant worldview of a society. One way cultural hegemony is enacted is through the exportation of products that promote a certain worldview. American supercorporations such as McDonald's and Walmart have come to dominate the global market, affecting the lives and cultures of people all around the world as Western values are imported along with the Western products. The next type of internationalism is revolutionary internationalism. Revolutionary internationalists believe that conflicts within societies are determined by international factors and alliances. Although revolutionary internationalism is not as common today as either hegemonic or liberal internationalism, revolutionary internationalism played a very important role shaping the modern world. Historical examples of revolutionary internationalism include the French Revolution and the American Revolution, where the revolution was a means to enact change and spread new ideas. More recently, the Arab Spring is an example of revolutionary internationalism, where ideals of democracy and the will to enact democracy through revolution began in Tunisia and spread across several Arab nations. So if you look at the world through a revolutionary internationalist lens, people believe that if the cards are stacked against you, you must forcibly enact change to improve your position, and this forcible change will affect nations other than your own. Finally, we have liberal internationalism. Liberal internationalism is the belief that, through greater interaction and cooperation, nations and nation-states can achieve common goals. Under this belief system, we see the ideal of nations working together for the good of the world, with no nation more powerful than others, but with each nation contributing to global peace and security. The United Nations Millennium Development Goals exemplify this type of internationalism, with many nations working together to create change for the better of the entire world. Specifically, the first goal was to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger by the year 2015. In their final report, the United Nations announced that globally the number of people living in extreme poverty has declined by more than half since 1990, and the number of people in the working middle class has almost tripled. These numbers clearly demonstrate that international effort can be extremely successful when countries are able to work together towards a common goal for humanity. Now that you know the different types of internationalism, it's important to understand that it's not black and white. The types of internationalism are more than just definitions, but they're also a way of looking at the world. Just because you believe the United Nations operates successfully through liberal internationalism, you do not have to believe that the entire world operates on the same principle. For example, if you believe the world operates on a hegemonic model, you will likely believe that all states are looking to increase their power and influence. That means you might believe that a body such as the United Nations will never be able to operate functionally, as a state's own desire for power will always come before the needs of other states. Nation-states have the ability to express internationalism in many different ways. A state's expression of internationalism, which, as we remember, is how states relate and interact with other states on a global scale, can change over history, and states can even pursue more than one expression at one time. The first way to express internationalism is isolationism. Isolationism is the total removal of a state from international social, economic, political, and military affairs. The United States is a great example of this, as over the course of their history they have pursued isolationism several times. During the Great Depression, the United States believed that they could restore economic prosperity by closing their borders and relying solely on internal trade. This economic form of isolationism is called protectionism, and it seeks to protect the industry of a country by restricting trade. However, this has the negative effects of decreasing the ability of a country to export goods to other countries. If you don't trade with us, we won't trade with you. A second expression is unilateralism. Unilateralism is when countries are motivated to respond to events on their own. They take actions in the international community without the aid or support of other countries. States who support unilateral actions see themselves as doing what has to be done when the rest of the international community refuses to act. However, the international community often sees unilateralism as a refusal to cooperate with other nations. An example of unilateralism is the American invasion of Iraq following 9/11, when American public opinion supported a retaliatory act, but the UN did not support the measure. The next expression of internationalism is bilateralism, which is when two countries work together on an issue. The United States and Canada are two countries which often participate in bilateralism. NORAD, or the North American Aerospace Defense Command, is an example of a bilateral project between Canada and the US. NORAD is an air defense system providing mutual protection from missile attacks on the continent. Multilateralism is the next form of internationalism. Multilateralism involves several states working together on a given issue. Middle powers, like Canada, Australia, and Chile, have traditionally chosen multilateral solutions to problems. The influence of middle powers is increased when they work together. An example of multilateralism is the Kyoto Protocol, which was meant to limit pollutants created by states. Although the Kyoto Protocol largely failed, it is still a prime example of several states working together to effect international change which individual states would not be able to accomplish alone. The final expression of internationalism is supranationalism. Supranationalism is when states agree to abide by the decisions of an international organization made up of independent appointed officials or representatives elected by member states. There are several examples of supranational organizations, including the European Union, the League of Nations, the United Nations, and the African Union, to name a few. All of these organizations are designed upon the idea that the needs of the world supersede the needs of a single state. So what purpose do internationalist organizations serve in the world? Well, internationalists believe the members of the global community accept collective responsibility for the challenges that face the world, and that the varying motives of nations and nation-states must be respected in the search for solutions. Agencies such as Doctors Without Borders and the World Health Organization are designed to improve the health of people around the world, regardless of what state they call home. Another internationalist organization is the Arctic Council, which deals with disputes over Arctic sovereignty and land use, as well as representing indigenous people who live in the Arctic regions. Organizations like the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, the World Trade Organization, and the World Bank are intended to increase the economic security of the world, preventing another event like the Great Depression. These organizations protect free trade and can offer loans and startup money to countries in the developing world. The theory is that economic security and prosperity in developing countries will benefit the entire world as these countries become more productive and contribute to the global economy. Other interest groups can also benefit from internationalism. Indigenous peoples, who individually lack power within countries which they have been colonized, have begun working together in various international organizations like the International Working Group on Indigenous Affairs. This group was successful in lobbying the United Nations to have their rights as Indigenous people internationally recognized. So that's internationalism. Now, answer these questions to check for understanding.